Hello everyone, welcome to the August session in our monthly webinar series. Today's presentation is entitled Paying for College 101. My name is Eric Steiner, and along with Aaron Griffin, we'll be your host for today's webinar. The presentation today will last approximately 45 to 50 minutes. At the end of that period, we will have time for a question and answer session. You can submit your questions for the Q&A session using either the chat window or the question window in your webinar user control panel. If you're experiencing a technical issue or have a question not related to the presentation, you can reach out to Aaron or myself using the same chat or question windows. As always, we're behind the scenes making sure everything runs smoothly for you today. Now, before we start the presentation, let me give you some background on today's presenter. Worked in the financial services industry since 2001. She's a certified credit counselor and has 14 years of experience as a mortgage loan officer. Barbara has a California real estate license and is bilingual, able to provide financial service advice to Spanish-speaking audiences. Well, without further ado, Barbara, I'll go ahead and turn the presentation over to you, and we can begin for today.
Thank you, Eric. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's presentation, Paying for College 101. I am excited to get started and really talk about the main 3 steps in taking care of college, whether it's saving for college, when you're in college and it's time to pay for college, or facing the reality of student loan debt after college, right? After you've graduated, what happens now? So let's get started. So in talking about saving for college, it is important to save as soon as possible. The sooner you start, the more time your money will have to grow. It is less expensive to save for college than to borrow for college. When you save, your money earns interest. When you borrow, you pay interest. So even if college is only a couple of years away, it's never too late to start saving, because every dollar you save is a dollar less you will have to borrow. So we're going to focus right now on the most common and popular and widely used college savings plans, the 529 plan, a Roth IRA, and we'll also touch on a couple of other savings plans that are available out there. So the 529 plan is also known as the Qualified Savings Plan. It's the most popular savings plan right now, and it is simply an umbrella that holds different investments. The account earnings are based upon market performance of your investments. So it's like a mutual fund, right, where you can invest wherever you want, be it conservative or as aggressive as you want. But you're dependent for a 529 plan on the sponsors. The state that you live in or any other state of the United States can be a sponsor, as well as a mutual fund company like Fidelity or Vanguard. Each state that offers a plan determines how its plan is structured and which investment options are offered through that particular plan. So again, they can choose to be as aggressive or as conservative as they want to. When you are choosing the sponsor, you want to look for good performance. You want to look at their performance history. Have they had a pretty steady and good performance? If so, that may be a good plan to choose. Also, you may have a tax deduction if you are investing in your particular state plan. The contributions that you can make towards this plan are $14,000 per year per person. That is the maximum amount you can contribute. Some of the tax benefits are that for federal and state, your contributions can grow tax-free, tax-deferred. And for your state, you may have a tax write-off. So you want to check with your particular state to see. And of course, that is available for residents of that particular state. So your state tax return may be eligible for that. All withdrawals used for qualified higher education expenses are exempt for federal income tax as well. So that's another tax benefit. So you want to look, are they performing well? Is your particular state plan performing well? Do they give you a tax benefit or not? depending on those two things, you may want to invest in your own state, or you can invest in any other state plan. A lot of people will also invest in the state plan where their kids will be going to college. The 529 plans have some flexibility to them. Some of the plans already come pre-selected with their investment options. But you can also have the ability to change investment choices, and you need to check with a particular sponsor and plan to see what kind of flexibility you have for that. Or you could transfer your 529 plan from one plan to the other. You could go either from a state plan to a plan where it's through a mutual fund company, or from one state to another state. So you are able to make those changes once a year. Who has control over the investment and the actual plan? It's you, the owner. The owner is the parent or grandparent of the student. You control the amount that goes in, up to $14,000, and the timing and amount of the distributions. The restrictions, though, there are some restrictions to this type of plan, are that there's only one listed beneficiary per plan. So if you have 3 kids, you would have to open 3 different 529 plans, 1 per beneficiary. The funds are also only good for qualified college expenses. So these are things like tuition or books or maybe some fees. Sometimes some dorm and eating plans are also included, but in general, they are not for any living expenses. So not your apartment or groceries or any other living expenses. And then what happens if you don't need the funds? Let's say one of your children gets a full ride scholarship or decides not to go to college. Those funds need to be used either for that particular beneficiary, or they need to be transferred onto another 529 plan for you to avoid any penalties or taxes. So you could definitely transfer it to the next child that is planning on going to college. If, though, they don't get used by any of the children, or they don't all get used, when you liquidate the funds, it needs to be liquidated by you, the owner of the plan, and you will have to pay taxes and penalty. Another thing to keep in mind, and we will talk in just a little bit about applying for financial aid, is that this type of plan will be considered an asset and therefore affect the eligibility for financial aid, because it's considered an asset for the parent. Now, another savings plan that has become a popular option in the last 10 years is a Roth IRA. A Roth IRA, we traditionally know it as a retirement savings account, and it still definitely is that. But it has some flexibility that it allows you to use the money for qualified college expenses. The location where you hold or you open your IRA, your Roth IRA, you can have quite a few choices. You can open one through a bank, like your local bank or credit union, through an investment firm like Charles Schwab or Edward Jones, or through a mutual fund company like a Fidelity or Vanguard. So you really have those options. With the 529 plan, you have the options of mutual fund companies or your state plans. The limit with the Roth IRA is that you only can contribute $5,500 per year per person. So, of course, if you're a married couple, that's $5,500 per person. That makes it $11,000, which is less than what you can contribute on a 529 plan. If you're 50 years old or older, you could contribute an additional $1,000 per year per person. That is considered the catch-up amount. There are some tax benefits to having your Roth IRA as a college savings account. The contributions grow federal and state tax-free, but you have to be aware that there's a 5-year holding rule, and it needs to be used after 59 and a half without you having to pay taxes on that growth if it's not used for college expenses. But there are no federal or state taxes on the funds used for qualified college expenses. And no penalties also if you're withdrawing what you have contributed after the 5-year holding rule. So, with a Roth IRA, anything you contribute into it, it's already post-tax money, so you can withdraw it to really use it for whatever you want and not have to pay a penalty for it. When you're withdrawing the growth of that Roth IRA and you're using it for college qualified college expenses, then you don't pay tax or penalty. Now, a Roth IRA has some flexibility, actually more flexibility than the 529 plan. One in where you can choose to have your Roth IRA. You have more choices there. You also have more flexibility in the investments that you're choosing. Again, you could be as conservative or as aggressive as you would like to be. You're not limited to what the state plan or the particular 529 plan that you're choosing has already under its umbrella. You can make up on a Roth IRA whatever you want. Another flexibility with a Roth IRA is that you don't have to choose one particular beneficiary. You can have multiple. You can have just yourself. You can choose an amount to use, because if you decide I'm going to use half of my Roth IRA for college expenses, the other half I want to keep for my retirement, you can choose to do so. So that's the great flexibility that a Roth IRA has. And of course, you as the owner have full control of it. You can move it to any other location. You can also choose withdrawal amounts and timing of those amounts. Now let's talk about some other saving plans. These are the next two most popular, although they're no longer as popular. The Coverdell Savings Account was also previously known as an education IRA. The benefit applies not only to higher education, but also to elementary and secondary education expenses. So a lot of times when people are sending their kids to private school, they have tuition to pay, this may be a good savings plan for you. Distributions are not deductible. They do grow tax-free until distributed, though, at which time when you do take it out, you have to pay taxes on it. They are administered through investment and mutual fund companies, so you want to ask them, what options do they have for the Coverdell Savings Account. The contribution is even less than the Roth IRA. You are limited to $2,000 per year, and with an income limit of $95,000 a year. So if you make beyond $95,000, then you wouldn't be able to contribute to this type of plan. The plan is held in the beneficiary's name, not under the owner's name, right? Just the beneficiary. And so it affects the financial aid and their application because it will be an asset to the student. And you must be, the funds in this must be used by the time you're 30. If you have not used them, then they need to be cashed out and you need to pay the taxes on that. Another plan is the prepaid tuition plan. These were very popular in the past when people saw that tuition was starting to rise. But nowadays, they're not as popular because what they have, a lot of schools have done is that now they will do, you will be set with today's tuition rates, but at the time that you get ready to start college, you may have a differential to pay or additional fees to pay. And of course, schools are doing this because they're seeing that it's not cost effective for them to lock you in at today's tuition rates for tuition down the road, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. So it's still available. You can still, apply for these plans, but you want to definitely check what is in the fine print. How much will they have to charge you as fees or differentials? So pay close attention to that. It also severely restricts the attendance options that you have. Why? Because usually if you're paying a prepaid tuition plan, you're going to be choosing either a particular college or a group of state colleges. And so if your child decides not to go to college in your particular state or that particular college you invested in, then at that point you would have to cash out, and there could be, quite a few fees assigned to that. So there are restrictions in changing schools, out-of-state attendance. There's also a restriction in changing beneficiaries. We've talked about what if, your child gets a full rate scholarship. Could you change it to another child? Yes, you could, but there's quite a few restrictions to it. So you want to make sure you check on that. And, of course, check on the differential fees or differential charges that you may have. So this type of plan is mainly designed for those that maybe have had, family, generation after generation go to the same college. That may be a good plan for you. So look into that. Otherwise, we don't know where the kids are going. You don't know if they're going to be going out of state or going to college and earning a scholarship. This may not be the plan for you. Now, those were some of the savings plans. And remember, we said it's never too late to save. But if college is already here, whether you saved or not, you still want to apply for financial aid and see what you're eligible for. We're going to talk in more detail today about financial aid process, the grants and scholarships, the different types of loans, and other loan options. So let's start with the financial aid process. This can be pretty daunting to people, especially, first time going to college, parent and child sitting down to fill out this endless application. It's a very, very long process, tedious process that needs to be done once a year, usually around January or February before the school year starts in August or September. So every year you would have to fill out a FAFSA, which stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. The student applies under their name, but if the student is a dependent to the parents, right, as a dependent on their parents' tax returns, then the parent information is needed. Parents also need to fill out their income, their assets, their debt information, all of it. They will look at all of that. They will also ask for the tax returns. It determines the eligibility and amount for federal grants and loans. So the FAFSA, once it's submitted, you will receive a report, or the results of your FAFSA application back to you with the eligibility, how much, and they will specify it per dollar amounts, how much you're eligible for grants, how much you're eligible for federal loans, and also private loans. Just because you're eligible doesn't mean you actually are going to be receiving them. Not in some of these, in some yes, in some no, and we'll go into detail of that as well. But as you're going through the FAFSA application, as you're applying for all of this, you want to become very familiar with your college financial aid department. Once you know what college you're attending, you definitely want to get acquainted with them. The deadlines for schools differ from school to school. So even though the federal deadline may be in January or February, your particular school, the deadline could be different. So you want to definitely check those things out before you apply for the FAFSA. Make sure you're still on time. So get involved with the financial aid office. The school may have different requirements as well. It may be not just the FAFSA, but any other form additional that you may need to fill out. Because the school itself may have special grants or scholarships additional to the FAFSA. Now, once you apply and you get the results, the FAFSA will let you know what you're eligible for. If you're eligible for grants and scholarships, these are awards that do not have to be repaid. So ideally, the majority of your funding will come from this, grants and scholarships. That way, you know you don't have to pay those back. There are federal grants. Those are grants like Pell Grants that are based on financial need. And of course, that information is coming from the FAFSA. There are state grants. Some individual state issue grants for residents only. So if you're going to a state school, that may be an advantage right there. Other grants are also available. Grants are usually need-based, based on your financial need. But some grants will combine certain eligibility criteria, maybe financial need, but also the area of study that you're going into, your GPA, your ethnicity, to see what other grants you may be eligible for. Now, scholarships. Scholarships are great because they're similar to grants. You do not need to pay them back, but they're great as well because there's millions of dollars out there waiting to be awarded, but they go unclaimed every year because people don't apply. So you definitely want to take advantage of applying for scholarships. I have always said it feels like a part-time job when you're applying for scholarships, but it's definitely worthwhile. Go ahead and do that part-time job of sitting down, looking up scholarships, filling them out, doing, essays that you have to submit with them, cover letters, etc. It is definitely worth it if down the road you're not going to have to pay those student loans back. The scholarships are based on different eligibilities criteria, like gender, like race, area of study, religion, your GPA. A lot of them are merit-based. What it means is you want to be the best of the best to be eligible for scholarships. The best GPA, right? The best maybe extracurricular activities. So make sure to apply for both of these because that could save you a lot of money down the road. Now, if you weren't eligible, you didn't qualify for some of those things, hopefully you're then eligible for the next tier of financial aid, which is federal loans. They're also called Stafford loans. These are available for students, federal Stafford student loans. These are based on financial need. So as the information submitted on your FAFSA for you and your parents, at that point they will see, is there a financial need for the student? If there is, they're going to tell you how much of federal Stafford loans you're able to receive. The loan is granted under the student's name. So that means your parents won't be owing this debt. It will only be you. There's no credit check. It's only based on financial need. It has better deferment options than private loans. So if you have to take a loan and you're eligible for these are the ones to take because they have lower interest rates as well. Now, private student loans. Again, these are student loans under your name only. They're not based on financial need. They're based on your credit and income. So they're credit underwritten. They're going to look at whether or not you have good credit history, good credit score, good enough income to afford that student loan. A lot of times, students just starting college, maybe have not had a lot of credit history or work history, will require a cosigner. A lot of times, the cosigner is going to be your parents. The cosigner may result, by having a cosigner, it may result in lower interest rates. So if your parents have excellent credit and good income, that may help you obtain a lower interest rate on that loan. But both are equally responsible. The student and the cosigner equally responsible for the payments and how it will affect your credit. These private loans are usually offered through Sallie Mae or any other financial institution that is doing student loans. You can check to see if Wells Fargo, big banks like Wells Fargo or Chase or Citibank are offering them. So with these types of loans, you want to shop around. You want to make sure you're getting the best terms and the best interest rate. Now, for parents, through the FAFSA, you'll also be able to find out if you're eligible for Federal Plus loans, or they're also called Parent Plus loans. These are federal loans, but they're not based on financial need. They're based on income and credit. So they're federal loans, which will give you a better interest rate still than private loans, better terms as well as private loans, but you have to be credit underwritten. That means no late payments in the last 12 months, no active public records or collections in the last 3 years. The loan is granted only under the parent's name, and so therefore the responsibility only lies with the parent. Interest may be tax deductible. So you want to check with your tax preparer and see, can you deduct that interest rate? There is a limit of $145,000 in income per year in a two-parent household for you to be able to claim that tax deduction. So again, the FAFSA application will tell you how much you're eligible for, but you still need to qualify. And if you didn't have or weren't eligible for federal parent loans, or if that wasn't enough to cover all of the college expenses, private loans, again, are always available. They're available to anyone that has good credit, good income. And you can go to the private institutions that are offering them. It's becoming a little bit harder and harder to find those private loans because we have seen that, and you may hear it on the news all the time, that student loans may become the next bubble to burst, just like we had real estate and mortgage a few years back. So the private financing companies are having stricter and stricter guidelines, or they're completely going out of the business of doing student loans. So you want to check for that. A good place to check for something like that is the studentaid.ed.gov. I'll be giving that website quite a few times because it's a great asset. They will have a list of private lenders on that website. Your interest, again, may be tax deductible, so you want to check with your tax preparer. And your interest rates are based on your qualifying power. How good is your credit score? Now, if you still didn't have enough, or you want to avoid loans as much as possible, which I recommend, looking at other options is really important. Thinking a little bit outside the box and seeing, first, when you apply for the FAFSA, check the box that says that you want federal work-study program to see if you're eligible for it, to see if your school has any work-study available for you. How does a federal work-study program work? Well, it's an on-campus job applied for through the FAFSA. The campuses will have a variety of jobs available for students. They usually will pay you a minimum wage. And it's jobs like maybe working at the library, putting books back, or maybe cleaning the gym, different variety of jobs throughout the school. The minimum wage you usually get paid goes straight to the school to offset some of the tuition or fees that you have due. So that's a great way to reduce some of that debt. Some school programs may also pay you a portion of it. So that's a great way to have a part-time job. Another option is to think of going to community college for the first 2 years. A community or junior college can save you quite a bit of money versus going to a state or private college. And the first 2 years of attending a community college can satisfy many of your undergraduate requirements and get it out of the way before moving on to a more expensive college. And you want to talk to your community college about the transferability of the credits. You want to make sure that what you're taking will transfer to the college you're going beyond the community college. So in order to save some money, in order to not have so much debt at the end of college, it's so important to start thinking of these options. Another option that's becoming more popular because of the cost of college is part-time attendance. Some students are deciding to take longer in college, but at least be able to support themselves and pay some of the tuition to offset all the loan debt. It is not uncommon for me to talk to people on the phone as a money coach that have 50, 100,000. I think the highest I've heard of is 253,000 in student loan debt. That is more than a house payment for a lot of people. So make sure to take advantage of all these other options before signing up for student debt. But if you had to, if you did everything that you could and still had to obtain some student loans, or now we're at this point where there is student loan, no matter what happened in the past, there are some repayment strategies for both student and parents. And if you cannot afford it, there are some options as well. So we'll talk about these next. Let's start talking about repaying loans for students. I always say you start with a budget. You start by looking at how much money you have coming in. Remember, this is after you've graduated college, so hopefully you have a job, you are looking at your budget. Now you, of course, have expenses, and you can make room in there, in that budget, to pay your student loans back. That is really the first step. The next step is to look at if you have this much in student loans and how many student loans you have. People will end with a lot of student loans sometimes, a large number of student loans, because you're applying every year, remember. So every year you may get one or two or more, and at the end of college, people have quite a few student loans. So sometimes consolidating them is a good option, depending on the terms you have, depending on the amount of loans, amount of each loan. It may be good to consolidate it into one particular loan with one fixed interest rate. If they're federal, you need to consolidate your federal loans together. If they're private loans, you need to look into the financial institutions to see who could consolidate those private student loans together. So look into that, do the numbers, and see if it makes financial sense to consolidate them. Sometimes you got your student loans at a point where interest rates were pretty low, and sometimes consolidating could increase that interest rate drastically. So that may not be a good option. Also, income-based repayment plans. You want to look into income-based repayment plans, especially soon after graduation of college, because these payment plans are taking into consideration that at the beginning of your career, you're going to be making less money. Therefore, they can charge you less for a monthly payment. And it gradually increases as your income is increasing. So look into these payment plans. Then there are also forgiveness programs. Make sure to look into this. Usually, public service employees can apply and may be eligible for forgiveness programs. Whether you work for a volunteer organization, something like AmeriCorps or Vista, or if you have a military background, maybe you may be eligible for this whether you are both active or reservist. So look into it. Ask your military personnel office and see what you may be able to do. And different employment situations, like teaching, medical, or legal, or government, depending on the public service that you are doing. Don't just assume that you are working on a public service or for a public service organization and that you're eligible. You want to contact your student loans and your job itself to see if they know of you being eligible. Now, there is a new student loan forgiveness program that is new for students starting out this year in 2014. Starting now, even if you do not work through a public service institution, you may be eligible for a forgiveness program. If you work for a public service organization, the debt can be forgiven after 10 years of you making on-time payments. So you're making on-time payments for 10 years, the rest of your debt is forgiven. For the new student loan forgiveness program that's starting this year, you would have to work 20 years and any remaining debt after the 20 years would be forgiven. There are some guidelines and some qualification criteria that you need to look into for either type of forgiveness program. So make sure to look and see, because some of these have income limitations. Some of them have limitations of how much you're paying every month as well. So look into those. But definitely research it, because if you could be eligible, you don't want to pass up that chance. Now, repayment strategies for parents. Well, these are a little bit more limited and not necessarily as forgiving, right? For a parent, whether it was a Parent Plus loan or a private loan, you want to contact the loan lender to see, are you eligible for any type of repayment plan? Sometimes if this is a Parent Plus loan, a federal loan, and you work for a public service organization, you may also be eligible for a forgiveness after 10 years. So look into that. But if you've looked into everything and there's been no options for you, you always also have to start with completing a budget, seeing where you can fit it in. A lot of times it may mean, well, I have to cut out of some unnecessary expenses, like cable, for example, to make the student loan payment. You may need to look into your home to see, do you have equity? Could you get a home equity loan? Could you refinance your loan? The advantage of doing a home loan is that it's tax deductible as well. So if you were able to deduct your private student interest that you were paying or your student loan interest, then you may be able to just deduct it from your home equity loan or your refinance. So look into that. But all you're doing is moving one debt from one place to the next. And now you've grown your home debt. So it's something to really think about before going through with it. Another option for a lot of people is a retirement account. A lot of people are having to tap into their retirement accounts to just get out of student loan debt. This, of course, we keep it as a last resort, because ideally you wouldn't have to touch your retirement assets to pay a student debt. But if you have to, because student loan is so high, or because maybe you're going to have a pension and then your retirement account is just extra money. Great. Then the loan has no tax implications or penalty. That's a good option to have. You are also paying yourself back with a 401k loan or a TSP loan. Using your funds, though, for something else other than a retirement has now made that unsecured debt, you've touched something that was protected or secured. For example, if you, let's say, we're going to be filing for bankruptcy for some reason, money that has been taken out of your retirement account is no longer protected. It also can no longer grow at the rate it was growing because you've taken out a big chunk of money. So you want to sit down and really do the numbers and see if this is the right step for you to take. But it's definitely an option.
Hey, Barbara, I just want to make you aware of the time. We are at 2:40 right now.
Thank you, thank you. And what happens if you can't afford the debt? As a student, if you cannot afford the debt, there are some options. You want to contact your lender right away. If you fear that you're not going to be able to make the next payment, contact them before you even miss it. If you've already missed it, still contact them. You want to ask for a forbearance or a deferral. There are certain parameters that they have for you to apply and qualify for those. How many times have you deferred your loans? How many forbearance programs have you gone through? But that is there to help you. Also, two numbers are very important to keep in mind as the Student Aid Ombudsman and the Consumer Finance. The Student Aid Ombudsman is a quasi-government agency, and it's really created to inform you, educate you, and guide you. Sometimes they might serve, as your liaison between you and your lender. Now, if you've been in default, if you have already face default. What is default, first of all? Default is when you have missed 3 payments in a row. So you are at 90 days past due. If you're already at default, then the options are limited, but you still have some options. It really opens you up for collection and garnishment of your paycheck. It may add penalties and additional interest because you've faced default. But you can ask for a remedial program. A remedial program is when they have you make payments, and they will set the payment amount for 9 months. That's usually the terms that they have. And they want to see that you show 9 months payment history on time before they can get you out of default status. You are not eligible for any other programs while you're on default, whether it's forbearance or deferral or even income-based, any of those programs. You have to be out of default to be eligible. And I want you to keep in mind that if you are at this point, it's tough to deal with student loans because, in general, student loans are not eligible to be included in bankruptcy. That means we're stuck with them. We have to pay them. Now, as a parent, if you cannot afford the student loans anymore, you can have the same options. Contact your lenders right away to ask for forbearance or deferral. Forbearance, a lot of times, is the set payment that they will set for you, or give you just a 2 or 3 months period of time where you don't have to make a payment. A deferral is usually 6 months or a year. If you face default, again, you have the same options. You want to ask for a remedial program. They're not dischargeable in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, but you may have the option of a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. That goes both for student loans or parent loans. Chapter 13 puts a stay on the collection or garnishment if you already had one, and it becomes part of the trustee repayment plan. For 3 or 5 years, you're going to have to pay your student loans through the court. But that payment may not cover the full payment. So at the end of the bankruptcy, you may have higher debt. So if you're facing this, you want to consult an attorney. You want to see if bankruptcy Chapter 13 would even be helpful to you. Now that we've talked about all the different stages, all the different options, it's really important to create a specific, measurable goal and plan that will help you plan whether it's to save for college, whether it is to pay back the loans, but it's very important to create this action plan. Set those goals, set those timelines. And if you have further questions, you can always contact your EAP provider for a financial referral. Your benefit includes a one-on-one consultation with a specialist that can help you assess your particular situation and give you some guidance. So I hope that today you gained some valuable insights that can help you make informed student loan decisions and planning and saving for college decisions. I hope that today has been, good information to you that you can take on and hopefully, start saving today for college, whether it's college 10 years from now or college that starts next month. So thank you so much for your attendance today, and I will open it up for questions now. Eric, you can tell me if we have some good questions.
We do. In fact, this is such a wonderful presentation. The questions were coming in all throughout. So we'll go ahead and start with one. And while we're answering this question, if you do have another question you'd like to ask, as minor or as major as you think it may be, go ahead and submit that question to us, and we'll get it in the queue and see how much time we have to get through all these questions. The first one is, let's say we have an adult who's currently looking at going back to school. Would they be eligible to do all of this for themselves as well? So we're looking at someone who may be not a traditional college-age student, or someone a little bit older who may be going back for to continue education or start it from scratch.
Yes, you are eligible for all of those. At the beginning, when we started talking about the FAFSA, I talked about the student can apply on his own, or if they're a dependent in someone else's tax return, then the parents would need to be, part of it. But if you're not a dependent on anyone's tax return, you are, you can apply for yourself. And the FAFSA will let you know what you're eligible for. Of course, you're putting in the FAFSA your income, your credit, your assets, all of that, and they will take that into account. But yes, you're eligible for all of it.
Great. Here's another question, Barbara. Are Stafford loans guaranteed if they are unsubsidized?
Stafford loans are a guaranteed amount because these are based on financial need and not credit. So you've submitted through your FAFSA all of your income information, therefore it will tell them exactly how much you will receive. And yes, they are guaranteed, whether they're subsidized or unsubsidized. And they will let you know that. They will separate as well in the FAFSA what is subsidized and how much that is guaranteed, and how much is unsubsidized and how much is guaranteed.
That's a great response. And here's another one. Would signing up for a mortgage on a house increase or decrease my chances to receive financial aid?
Can you repeat that?
Oh, certainly. Would signing up for a mortgage on a house increase or decrease my chances to receive financial aid?
Okay. So that what I'm thinking the question means is you don't have a home yet, but you would be applying for getting a mortgage loan. So if you didn't have that as an asset or as a debt, you would be probably eligible for a little bit more, of course, depending on income and other assets. But the mortgage could definitely, it's a new debt and it's a new asset as well. It's something that you have to report, and it could definitely have an effect on the results.
And here's another question, Barbara. Can you pay off government loans at any time early?
Yes, great question. You could pay your government loans and even private loans anytime while you're in college still. And even after college, if you decide, yes, I won the lottery, I want to pay them off, yes, you could. And so when we talked about loan consolidation options, we talked about also, let's say, getting equity out of your home or paying them out of your retirement savings. That would be paying off your student loans completely, right? And assuming another debt in another fashion, whether it's a mortgage or a retirement savings. So it's the same way that the loans would be paid off. So you can start paying them down while you're in college, or you can pay them off at any time.
Okay, Barbara, here's an interesting one. I'll try to rephrase this in a way that we might be able to discuss this.
Okay.
Do you have to pay taxes on scholarships?
It depends on whose name is it under. If it's the student's name, no. You don't. I think that's a great question, because I do not believe they are qualified as income. They're really qualified as a grant or as a gift. Great question. I would definitely have to check with one of my tax specialists to see if there's any way that they would be qualified as income. I do not believe so, and I'm sorry I don't have a straight answer for that. I believe they're given as a grant or a gift. That's how they're qualified. I would love to get back to anyone. If they can send me their information, I'm happy to get back to you with more of a specific answer to that. Great question.
Oh, and it looks like we have another response. Is they might be reported on a 1099, which is how that may be included at the tax time. But I do think that's certainly a great question and worth maybe exploring.
If it's issued to you as a 1099, then it is being declared as income.
Oh, great, great.
Okay, so yes. So if you've received a 1099 and it'll say on your 1099 other income and it's listed with that amount, then yes. But I don't believe all scholarships or grants are reported that way. So, and that's what I can double check on.
Okay. Here's another question. If I was a dependent on someone's tax return 2 years ago, do I have to include their information on my FAFSA?
It would be on the latest year, 1 year worth of tax return. So if this past year when you filed for this past year, you were not a dependent, then no, you would not have to declare 2 years beyond that. And that's true for every year, right? So it could mean that the first year you go to college, you are as a dependent. You apply for FAFSA the following year, and you're no longer a dependent. You could apply on your own.
That's a great response. Here's another one, Barbara. If you do a loan consolidation, do you lose the income tax deduction on student loan interest paid throughout the year?
It depends on how you do the loan consolidation. If you're consolidating all federal loans through the direct loan consolidation system that federal loans have, then that tax, you could still obtain the tax deduction on that interest that you're paying. If you're consolidating all your private loans together and that tax deduction still qualifies, yes, you can. Now, if you're consolidating both of them, and there are a lot of new companies out there that offer to consolidate both, federal loans and private loans, I would be wary of them, because some of that, depending on how that institution has labeled the student loans, if they're still considered student loans, that may be eligible for tax deduction. If they've lumped them into some type of new kind of personal loan, then that would not be tax deductible. So you want to make sure whoever you're going to consolidate them with, as you're doing the research, ask them how they will be declaring it. Okay?
Okay. I'm going to put out this question as well. My college told me paying off my government loans would decrease my chance in receiving additional loan assistance. Is that something you've ever encountered or been familiar with?
No. So what they're saying is that, this is what I'm inferring from that, is that the more debt you have in student loan, the more eligible you are then for other loans or for other financial aid. Again, in your FAFSA, you're going to have the income, the debt, the assets listed on there. But assets is what is going to the amount of assets that you have is what's really going to make more of a impact on your eligibility, not the amount of debt that you have. So when you're weighing one against the other, assets will have a bigger impact. So I've never really heard of them saying, you have to keep the debt in order to qualify for more debt. So that's a new one to me.
Okay, and I know we've already answered a number of questions, and this has certainly been a terrific session. So I'm going to ask one more, and then we'll go ahead and close from here.
Okay.
Even with scholarships and student loans, do you recommend planning to work during school to help prepare for paying back student debt?
I recommend working if you can during college to offset anything that you can. Yes. So if the bulk of your payment, your tuition is being paid by scholarships, great. If you're having to get a little bit of student loans and you can pay at least the interest, if these are unsubsidized or private loans and you can be paying interest towards that and having a job so that you can pay that interest, you could be saving yourself quite a bit of money down the road, because as you're in school, that interest is being deferred and is being added to the end of the loan, which is a great benefit because you don't have to start making the payments yet. But if you could graduate without having your debt be bigger than what you borrowed, that's an advantage right there. So yes, I always recommend, if you can afford to, to work, do so.
Well, great. We certainly appreciate everyone joining us today. And Barbara, do you have any closing thoughts you would like to end the presentation with?
Thank you. I just want to thank everyone for your attendance. Thank you for the great questions. It's been a pleasure for me to present this to you. And until next time, thank you to both Eric and Aaron as well.
Well, thanks, everyone. And again, we look forward to hopefully seeing you next month during September's webinar presentation. Please enjoy the rest of your day.